Good morning. Warble's on a lot here with the dag end of the Outsiders and hopefully first dog on the moon.
Plebiscite on single-sex marriage. It looks, David, that is not going to get up, that the Greens and Labor will knock that off in the Senate. Good or bad?
Two things I'll say about that. The first one is that we need to have marriage equality in this country, in my personal opinion. I'd love to be able to marry my partner, who I've been with for 6 years, and actually I'd really like the government to get out of my personal life and let me get on with running my own life. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is that, unfortunately, this Prime Minister, lacking the bravery and courage that we just heard about, did a deal with the right wing of his party to maintain this commitment to a plebiscite. Now, for whatever reason, the majority of Australian people re-elected this government with that as part of their election commitment. I don't know what's worse, the plebiscite or breaking an election promise, but I kind of think that it's better, if that was your commitment when you went to the election, that you're going to have a ballot on it, then let's have a ballot. But the overwhelming majority of Australian people in every poll that's published, it shows what the result is going to be. And if they squib it by saying now we're going to bring the results out electorate by electorate so that MPs can say, oh, but in my electorate people opposed it, so I'm going to vote no.
Well, they're not going to be committed.
They've already said it's not binding.
Exactly.
It's a massive waste of money and it's a platform for hate speech.
Maybe it's the accidental compromise that we need, Yasmin, is to have the PM put the legislation up and fruit be knocked off.
I think the problem is when you allow something like this to occur, or even the conversation to happen, is you allow a sort of a speech that is bigoted and xenophobic, or bigoted and homophobic, and then you also set the scene for people to be like, well, I don't like somebody else, or I don't like how somebody else lives, and that is okay for me. And that language then allows all sorts of other hate speech to occur in all sorts of other areas. And that for me is incredibly dangerous.
Which you suspect was always the intention of the plebiscite, to legitimise that sort of a conversation.
Absolutely. I think it's really disingenuous when they didn't plan to follow through. This is not a government committed to participatory democracy. So
that's it for our Outsiders, because we're participatory and we're democratic. Our thanks to Yasmin Abdel-Majid, writer, and many other things. 2015 Queensland Young Australian of the Year. That's significant in my mind. David Bates is Managing Director of Workforce Guardian. Christy Clark is an academic and co-founder. She found it and then of the Feminist Writers Festival. Budget emergency. First dog on the moon is in pursuit. All right, I think this is a good spot. Cast the anchor. Right. Welcome to this week's edition of This Twitching Life, a show for wildlife enthusiasts from all over the country. I'm First Dog on the Moon, and I'm joined today by Professor Foggington from the Tiny Furry Animals Department at Bungendore University in New South Wales. Hello. This week, we're in the Australian Capital Territory, out here on Lake Burley Griffin in our tinny, because we're looking for a very rare and very elusive creature. Be very, very quiet. What are you doing? Oh, well, stop it. Oh, sorry. As I was saying, we've come out here to find the elusive and mysterious budget emergency. What on earth was that? It's my huge theatre organ. I thought you'd appreciate some music to set the tone. How did you get a Wurlitzer in the boat without me seeing it? Well, I had it in my bum bag. Well, that is enough, all right? We've come out here to find the elusive budget emergency. Would you stop that? Oh, sorry. The mysterious budget emergency hasn't been seen since Joe Hockey was treasurer. Now, people talk about it a lot, but only certain people could see it. And now it's back, apparently, somewhere. Oh, there it is. No, I think that's one of those bird thingies, some kind of bird. I can tell because it has wings and the pointy thing at the front of its head. A beak? Yes, that's the one. It could be Christopher Pine. Oh, no, the feathers are all wrong. Oh, is that one? It looks similar, but I think that's a taxed knot. Taxed what? No, a taxed knot. It's like a taxed, only not. Stop that. Oh, no, I think that is a spotted pleb, but I'll mark it on the list as a sighting. Oh, all right, yes, a pleb sighting. Oh, there's another. Do you think they're a breeding pair? Well, it's funny you should say that. You know, I've never actually seen a budget emergency in the wild. The only one I ever saw was being brought into the country illegally. What, by a budget smuggler? Yes, he had it in his undies. Right, I've had enough. Oh, you've thrown my organ into Lake Burley Griffin. Yes, I have. Oh, now there's something in the water. I think your whirl has attracted something. It's under the boat. Is it a croc? No, I'm sure it's a real one. Oh, no! It's a budget emergency! Quick, cut it spending. No, tax it. It's too late! And that is it for Sunday Extra this week. If you've missed anything...
Yeah. Well, a budget emergency. I suppose there probably is, in the sense that Australia's in debt, and it's doubtful whether the existing capacity for making a profit is going to raise enough tax in a corporate sense to ever pay off that debt. But that's, should be neither here nor there. People, in my opinion, probably should pay more attention to the fact that we've just had the 16th consecutive hottest ever month in recorded history. July was the hottest ever July in recorded history. June, the hottest June, blah, 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 blah. 16 months, hottest ever recorded. I think we've confirmed to have raised the temperature of the planet by 1.2 degrees, as measured against the, quote, long-term baseline, which was the average of 1950 to 1980 temperatures. However, it's now been confirmed that there's detectable global atmospheric temperature response as early as the 1850s, to the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when they first started using steam engines to pump out coal mines in England, and therefore the people running the coal mines had virtually free fuel for their steam engines, so it didn't matter how inefficient they were or how smoky, because they could still use those steam engines burning the shitty coal to pump out the coal mine, to dig out the better grade coal, which they could then sell to other people for things like steel making. I think there's something like 4 tonnes of coal, 2 tonnes of coal, 4 tonnes of ore to make 1 tonne of steel, something like that. Perhaps it's 4 tonnes of coal and 1 tonne of ore, but it's I think it's 40 hectares of forest to make enough charcoal to make 1 tonne of steel. So if you think about it that way, you can see that by the time humanity shifted to burning coal in its steel-making processes as against charcoal, they had to do it, otherwise the planet would not have a stick of wood on it left at the moment, because they were determined to expand. They were determined to expand their population so that they could expand their consumer base, so they could expand their economy, so that they could expand their tax base, so they could sustain a bigger military, so they could seize and hold more resources. Because once harvest everythingism started 10,000 years ago, the tribes, cultures, clans and nations which practiced harvest everything very rapidly outgrew their local traditional ancestral landscapes' abilities to sustain the numbers that they were achieving. So, yeah, these are the things that should be bothering our politicians, not, oh, we had too much factional infighting. Adam Giles got kicked out because his was the government which came into power, found that the previous government had started torturing and tear gassing children and putting hoods over their heads like it was sadistic Abu Ghraib type institutions, and they had neglected to provide a legislative framework to cover their activities. So the Liberal National Government in Queensland, in Northern Territory, when they got in 3 years ago, the first thing they did was legislate to make it legal to torture teenagers and to tear gas them and to strap them into a chair with a hood over their head, as if they were in the sadomasochistic wing of Abu Ghraib. And now he's only got 3 members in the parliament of 25. He's become a minority smaller than the Greens and the Independents. And he wonders why. He thinks it's because of internal infighting. Bloody insane. There's a lot of insanity going on at the moment. Those of you who are familiar with my channel will notice that I put up a video called Fording the Causeway. And I kind of sort of expected to get a bit more flack over that video than I did. The fact that I got across the causeway obviously meant that it was safe. And there's a major outcry from the police and the emergency services every time it rains, every time a bloody creek comes up, and every time there's visible water on top of the road. These would-be safety experts come out with their proclamations of how nobody should ever drive into water. If you watch that video, you'll see that I mentioned that it's about 1/3 of a metre, so therefore it should be safe. The reason 1/3 of a metre is safe for my car on that causeway is because my car's floor pan is 30 centimetres off the ground, 1/3 of a metre. The car's 1.6 metres across, and from the firewall behind the engine all the way back to the tailgate is 3 metres, so it's 4.68 square metres. So what that means is that if I were to take it into even still water, right, just a puddle that's 10 centimetres above the floor pan or 40 centimetres deep, I would be displacing at least 468 litres of water, which is half a tonne of buoyancy. If that water was moving sideways at, say, 10 kilometres an hour, which is a fairly slow speed, but you get it, it's doubtful whether the car would have enough weight on its wheels with the reduced weight compensating for the buoyancy to resist 10 centimetres worth of keel area for the entire length of the car. So I would probably be getting close to swept off at 40 centimetres. If I went in there with 50 centimetres, half a metre of water on the road, there would be 980 kilograms of water displaced. I'd have a tonne of buoyancy. And that's not considering the air in the tyres. So the car would probably be floating. The other things to look out for, if you've never ever driven through that particular causeway, and if the water's still enough that it looks safe, and if it's flat and you should walk it, make sure the depth gauge is accurate. Things to look out for when there is movement of water across the causeway is any kind of a standing wave. Even if the depth gauge says it's safe, if you can see a standing wave that stays there on the causeway, that either means there's a log on the causeway, it means the flow rate is much higher than you thought it was, or it means that there's a whole new pothole has been eroded in the causeway or the roadway, and if you drive out there, you might sink down into 2 or 3 metres worth of water. So there are rules on when a causeway is a safe causeway and it can be driven across, and a pretty good rule of thumb is don't take it into any water that's higher than the axle. Don't go above the centre of the wheel. And that'll generally have your floor pan out of the water, because not many cars have the centre of their axles higher up than they have the floor pan underneath the seats. But that's just rule of thumb. It's time for people to start thinking for themselves, and it's time for the authorities to stop treating everybody like fucking idiots. I mean, if I hadn't have made that particular trip across that particular causeway at that particular time, the 80-year-old mother would have run out of firewood in the middle of a rainy set period, and the batteries would have got hammered because there would have been nobody to start the generator. You know, it was a necessary trip in providing for the care of our aged and infirm. It was within my ability to assess the causeway. It was my job to be there, so I did it. Anyway, if you want to see a lesson on the absolute limits of going over causeways, check out that video. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.